The Wyoming wind carried the scent of gunpowder across the narrow canyon as Wyatt Morgan pressed his back against the red rock wall. 3 men down in the gulch, all hired guns. He'd counted 6 shots from the first man, 4 from the second. The third hadn't fired yet. Wyatt's Colt Army revolver felt heavy in his weathered hand. 5 chambers spent, 1 bullet remaining. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the canyon walls blood red, a fitting color for what was about to happen. Wyatt drew a slow breath, steadying his aim. At 48, he wasn't as quick as in his younger days, but 15 years as a Confederate scout and another 10 as a bounty hunter had taught him patience. The third gunman shifted behind a boulder, exposing his shoulder for just a fraction of a second. That was all Wyatt needed. The Colt roared, the sound reverberating through the canyon. The man screamed, clutching his shattered collarbone. Wyatt moved fast, closing the distance before the wounded gunman could recover. He kicked away the fallen man's weapon and pressed his boot against the bleeding shoulder. "Who sent you?" Wyatt's voice was granite, worn smooth by years in the saddle. The wounded man's face contorted in pain. "Miller. Victor Miller. Paid us to make sure you never reached Redemption Valley." Wyatt leaned in, his shadow falling across the gunman's face. "Why does Miller care about one old cowboy?" "Don't know. Just said you'd recognize his name." Blood bubbled at the corner of the man's mouth. "Said to tell you, Cooper's already dead. Please. I got a family." A rifle shot cracked through the air. The gunman's head snapped back. A red mist sprang across the canyon floor. Wyatt dropped instinctively, rolling behind the boulder. He peered around the edge, spotting a figure on the ridge above, a sharpshooter with a Winchester. Before he could move, the thunder of hoofbeats filled the canyon. 5 riders rounded the bend, rifles raised. Leading them was a man in a black duster, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The riders surrounded Wyatt, guns trained on his chest. "Mr. Morgan," the lead rider said, lifting his head to reveal a clean-shaven face with cold blue eyes. "Mr. Miller would like a word." The town of Redemption Valley sprawled across the Wyoming basin like an open wound. Raw, festering with saloons and brothels to serve the silver miners who worked the mountains above. Once a small ranching community, the discovery of silver had transformed it into a boomtown practically overnight. The coming railroad would only accelerate its growth. Wyatt sat straight-backed in the saddle as they rode down the main street, ignoring the stares from miners and townspeople. His hands were bound in front of him, but he held himself with the dignity of a man accustomed to facing death. They stopped before the largest building in town, a 3-story hotel with "Grand" painted in peeling gold letters across the front. Inside, Victor Miller waited in a private dining room, cutting into a thick steak with surgical precision. He was a large man, over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and hands that looked capable of bending horseshoes. His suit was tailored, expensive, a businessman's clothes worn by a fighter. "Wyatt Morgan," Miller said, not looking up from his meal. "Former Confederate scout, decorated veteran of the 3rd Virginia Cavalry, bounty hunter, and now cattle rancher in Montana." He speared a piece of meat. "Long way from home, Mr. Morgan." Wyatt remained silent, studying the man. Miller continued eating for a moment, then set down his knife and fork. "I know why you're here. Thomas Cooper sent for you. Unfortunately, Sheriff Cooper is no longer able to receive visitors." Miller dabbed his mouth with a napkin. "I'll make this simple. Whatever Cooper told you, whatever he asked of you, forget it. Get back on your horse and ride north. There's nothing for you here except a pine box." Wyatt's voice was steady. "Cooper saved my life at Chancellorsville. If he called, I came. That's how it works." Miller sighed, pushing away his plate. "Loyalty, admirable, but misplaced. Cooper stuck his nose where it didn't belong. You'd be wise not to make the same mistake." He nodded to his men. "See Mr. Morgan out of town. Make sure he's pointed toward Montana." They escorted Wyatt to the street, cutting his bonds. As he rubbed his wrists, a commotion erupted from an alley beside the hotel. A woman's scream, followed by the sound of a slap. Wyatt turned to see two men dragging a dark-haired woman behind the building. One had his hand clamped over her mouth. The other was tearing at her dress. Wyatt's eyes met those of Miller's men. "Not your concern," one said, hand resting on his holstered pistol. Wyatt nodded, appearing to mount his horse, then suddenly spun, driving his fist into the nearest man's throat. The man dropped, gasping. Wyatt ripped the man's revolver from its holster and smashed the butt against the second guard's temple. Both were down before they could draw. 3 long strides took him to the alley. The woman was pinned against the wall, her assailant's hand at her throat. The second man turned at Wyatt's approach, reaching for his gun. Wyatt fired once, the bullet shattering the man's kneecap. As he fell screaming, Wyatt seized the other attacker by the collar, yanking him away from the woman and driving him headfirst into the brick wall. "You all right, ma'am?" Wyatt asked, keeping the gun trained on the writhing men. The woman straightened her torn dress, dark eyes flashing with a mixture of fear and fury. "I am now." Her voice was steady despite her ordeal. "You've just made an enemy of Victor Miller. Those are his men." Wyatt glanced back toward the street where a crowd was forming. "Seems I already had that distinction." He offered his free hand. "Wyatt Morgan." She hesitated, then took it. "Sarah Hawkins." Her grip was firm, her hand calloused, not the hand of a saloon girl or a society woman. "You'd better come with me, Mr. Morgan. Miller's men will be looking for you now." John Blackhawk stood in the sheriff's office, the silver deputy's badge pinned to his buckskin vest, looking incongruous against his dark skin and the long black hair that marked his Cheyenne heritage. He stared impassively at Wyatt and Sarah. "Sheriff Cooper has been missing for 6 days," Blackhawk said, his accent revealing both his native tongue and a formal education. "Last seen riding toward the Carson property after reports of gunfire." Sarah leaned forward. "John, this is the man Cooper sent for. Wyatt Morgan." Recognition flashed in Blackhawk's eyes. "The Virginia scout. Cooper spoke of you." He extended his hand. "We need your help, Mr. Morgan. The situation here is complicated." Wyatt took Blackhawk's hand. "Tell me about Miller." "Former Union officer. Came here 3 years ago. Bought the largest silver claim in the valley. Now owns the assay office, the bank, and half the businesses in town." Blackhawk's face darkened. 7 ranchers have been killed in the past year. All had property Miller wanted. All ruled accidents by Judge Harmon, who built that new house on Miller's Silver. Sarah interjected, "My husband was the latest. James found something in our barn. Papers, a map. He was shot the next day while cleaning his rifle." Her voice was bitter. "Cooper was helping me investigate when he disappeared." Wyatt nodded slowly. "And where does the railroad fit in?" Blackhawk and Sarah exchanged surprised glances. "How did you know about the railroad?" Sarah asked. "Towns like this don't grow without a reason. Silver brings miners, but it's the railroad that brings civilization, and men like Miller." Wyatt moved to the window, surveying the bustling street. Cooper's letter mentioned powerful interests moving into the valley. A commotion outside drew their attention. 3 well-dressed men entered the sheriff's office, led by a portly figure in an expensive suit. "Deputy Blackhawk," the man said, ignoring the others. "I've come to inform you that the town council has appointed me acting sheriff until Cooper's situation is resolved." He smiled thinly, revealing gold teeth. "Charles Montgomery, at your service." Sarah stiffened beside Wyatt. "The banker," she whispered. Montgomery's eyes shifted to Wyatt. "And who might this be?" "Just passing through," Wyatt replied. "Indeed?" Montgomery's smile never reached his eyes. "Well, just passing through, I suggest you continue your journey promptly." Redemption Valley isn't a healthy place for drifters these days. He turned back to Blackhawk. Deputy, please surrender your badge and gun. Your services are no longer required. Blackhawk stood motionless, then slowly unpinned his badge and placed it on the desk. He kept his revolver. All of it, half-breed, one of Montgomery's men said. Blackhawk's hand drifted to his holster. Wyatt stepped forward, placing himself between the men. The gun's personal property. Law doesn't entitle you to that. Tension crackled in the small office. Finally, Montgomery waved a dismissive hand. Keep it, but I expect you both out of town by sundown. His eyes lingered on Sarah. Mrs. Hawkins, my condolences again on your loss. My offer to purchase your property still stands, while the offer lasts. After they left, Wyatt turned to his new allies. I need to see Cooper's house, and then Sarah's ranch. Blackhawk nodded. I'll take you, but we should hurry. When Montgomery says sundown, he means it. As they left the sheriff's office, none of them noticed the man in the alley across the street, a lean figure with a puckered scar running from his right eye to his jawline. He watched them mount their horses, then slipped away toward the Grand Hotel. In the shadowed alley, Marcus Reed smiled, the scar twisting his face into a grotesque mask. The war between him and Wyatt Morgan was about to reignite, 15 years after Gettysburg. Cooper's cabin sat nestled among pines at the edge of town, isolated and defensible, the home of a man who'd made enemies. Inside, Wyatt found signs of a thorough search. Floorboards had been pried up, furniture overturned, walls pierced with knife holes. They were looking for something specific, Wyatt said, running his fingers along a slash in Cooper's mattress. Blackhawk nodded. Cooper kept a journal, never let it out of his sight. Wyatt knelt by the stone fireplace, examining the hearth. Years of tracking men had taught him to think like Quarry. Where would Cooper hide something if he knew he was being hunted? Wyatt's fingers found a loose brick near the back of the firebox. Behind it was a small cavity containing an oilskin-wrapped package. Smart old wolf, Wyatt murmured, unwrapping Cooper's journal. The pages contained detailed notes on Miller's operations, maps of property acquisitions, and lists of accidents befalling landowners who refused to sell. But it was the final entry that caught Wyatt's attention. April 17, 1885. M confirms Miller only a pawn. The Western Development Association controls everything. Railroad survey completed. Their agent arrives tomorrow. God help us all. Sarah leaned over Wyatt's shoulder. Western Development Association? Trouble, Wyatt replied. Big money from back east. Railroads, mining, timber. They buy up land cheap before the tracks arrive, then sell at 10 times the price when the towns boom. He closed the journal. We need to see your ranch. If your husband found something important enough to get killed over, Miller's men have probably torn the place apart looking for it. The Hawkins Ranch sprawled across a picturesque valley, the kind of land railroad men drooled over. Flat, fertile, with a creek running through it and mountains providing a perfect backdrop for a future resort town. The main house had been ransacked, much like Cooper's cabin. Wyatt inspected the barn where James Hawkins had allegedly found the mysterious documents. The structure seemed ordinary, until Wyatt noticed the feeding trough. This is new lumber, he said, tapping the wooden trough. Different from the rest of the barn. Sarah nodded. James rebuilt it last fall. Wyatt examined the trough carefully, finding a false bottom. Beneath it was a metal strongbox. Inside lay a surveyor's map of Redemption Valley, with proposed railroad routes clearly marked. Certain properties were highlighted in red, all ranches that had suffered accidents. But most revealing was a letter on Western Development Association letterhead, detailing payments to key figures in the territory, including Judge Harmon, Banker Montgomery, and our operative in the sheriff's office. Not Cooper, Blackhawk said firmly. No, Wyatt agreed. His deputy before you, most likely. He studied the map. This explains everything. The railroad's coming directly through this valley. Every property marked in red sits on the proposed route. He pointed to the Hawkins Ranch, including this one. Sarah's face hardened. James died for this land. A horse's whinny outside cut the conversation short. Blackhawk moved to the window, peering out cautiously. Riders coming. At least 10 men. His voice remained calm, but his hand moved to his revolver. Miller's men. Wyatt quickly gathered the documents. Is there a back way out? Sarah nodded. Trail through the creek bed. Leads up to Cheyenne territory. Go, Wyatt ordered. Take the documents. Blackhawk, go with her. I'll hold them off. Meet you at your father's camp. Blackhawk hesitated, then nodded. He and Sarah slipped out the back as the riders approached the front of the barn. Wyatt positioned himself behind a stack of hay bales, Colt ready. The barn door creaked open. Sunlight silhouetted a tall figure, not one of Miller's common thugs. The man stepped inside and Wyatt's blood turned cold. The puckered scar, the lean frame, the distinctive way he carried his shoulders. I know you're in here, Morgan, called Marcus Reed, his Virginia accent still strong despite the years. Still hiding, just like at Gettysburg. He moved further into the barn, flanked by 2 gunmen. Remember how you left your men to die while you ran? How many was it? 12? Wyatt's hand tightened on the Colt. Reed had been his lieutenant in the 3rd Virginia Cavalry. They'd ridden together, fought together. Then came Gettysburg, and the order to charge Cemetery Ridge, a suicide mission Wyatt had refused to lead. Reed continued deeper into the barn. The boys are dead, Wyatt, all of them. Died charging that hill while you played coward. He spat on the ground. I survived, though. Took a Yankee saber across my face, but I lived. Lived to see you pay. Wyatt remained still, controlling his breathing. Reed was trying to provoke him, make him act rashly. The trick of a man who'd spent years as a hired gun. Where's the woman, Wyatt? Where's the map? My employer's paying good money to find it. Reed gestured to his men to spread out. Funny, isn't it? All these years, and here we are, still on opposite sides. Wyatt waited until Reed's men were sufficiently separated, then fired twice in rapid succession. Both men dropped before they could react. Reed dove behind a workbench, returning fire. Bullets splintered wood around Wyatt's position. Still a good shot, Reed called out, reloading his revolver. But you're outnumbered, old friend. My men outside are surrounding the barn. Wyatt spotted a lantern hanging near a pile of straw. He aimed carefully and fired. The lantern shattered, oil spraying across the dry straw, which erupted in flames. Smoke quickly filled the barn. Using the distraction, Wyatt darted toward the back exit. Gunfire followed him, a bullet grazing his shoulder. He burst outside, mounting his horse in one fluid motion. 8 riders were spread around the barn, momentarily confused by the growing fire. Wyatt spurred his horse toward the creek, bullets kicking up dirt behind him. The creek bed offered cover as he rode hard, the sound of pursuit growing distant. By the time he reached the foothills where the Cheyenne camp lay, darkness had fallen, and he'd lost any followers. His shoulder throbbed, blood soaking his shirt. But he'd survived, and more importantly, so had the evidence. Gray Wolf's camp occupied a secluded valley high in the mountains, invisible from below. The Cheyenne elder, Blackhawk's father, had established this refuge after refusing to move to the reservation. Here, about 30 Cheyenne lived as they had for generations, tolerated by the territorial government so long as they remained peaceful. Wyatt was ushered into Gray Wolf's lodge, where Sarah and Blackhawk waited with the aging chief. Gray Wolf studied Wyatt with penetrating eyes that had seen the westward expansion firsthand, had witnessed his people pushed from their ancestral lands by men like those now threatening Redemption Valley. My son says you fight against the railroad men, Gray Wolf said in perfect English, surprising Wyatt. Many white men have made such claims. Most lied. Wyatt met the chief's gaze. I'm fighting for a friend who helped me when no one else would. If that means fighting the railroad, so be it. Gray Wolf nodded slowly. The men you face, they are the same who drove us from the plains. They come with papers and laws, then with guns when papers fail. He gestured to the valley below. Soon they will want this land too. The association is powerful, Sarah interjected. They bought judges, politicians, even the territorial governor, according to Cooper's notes. Black Hawk, who had been examining the documents, looked up. There's more. According to this letter, the Western Development Association is hosting a meeting at the Grand Hotel tomorrow night. Every major investor will attend, including the territorial governor. Wyatt's mind raced. If we could get these documents to the federal marshal in Cheyenne— 3 days' ride, Black Hawk said, shaking his head. The meeting will be over. Decisions made. Then we need leverage, Wyatt decided. Something to stop them in their tracks. Sarah leaned forward. What about Cooper? If he's alive, his testimony plus these documents would be damning. Finding Cooper would mean returning to Redemption Valley, Black Hawk warned. Miller controls the town. Reed and his men will be watching for us. Wyatt winced as he shifted, his wounded shoulder protesting. Sarah moved to his side, examining the injury. It needs cleaning, she said, taking a medical kit from her saddlebag. As she worked on his wound, she spoke quietly. My husband wasn't just a rancher. He was a federal surveyor, mapping the territory for the government. That's how he discovered what the association was planning. Wyatt hissed as she cleaned the bullet graze. And you? What's your part in this? Sarah's hands paused. I worked for the Pinkerton Agency in Chicago, was sent to investigate land fraud in the territories. She resumed, bandaging his shoulder. James and it wasn't just a cover. Wyatt studied her face, seeing the truth there. You loved him. Yes. Her voice was barely audible. And I want the men who killed him to pay. Gray Wolf spoke again, breaking the moment. My scouts report a prisoner at the silver mine, heavily guarded. White man, older. Black Hawk straightened. Cooper. If he's alive, Miller's keeping him as insurance, Wyatt said, standing despite his injury. We need to get him out before the association realizes what we have. Gray Wolf raised a wrinkled hand. My people will help, not for your law, but for our land. He looked at his son. John knows the mine. He worked there before becoming deputy. Black Hawk nodded. The main shaft has a side tunnel where they keep dynamite. Minimal guards there. That's our way in, Wyatt decided. But we'll need a distraction. Sarah tucked the documents into her coat. I can provide that. Miller's men don't know I'm working with you. I'll visit Montgomery at the bank, claim I'm ready to sell the ranch. Too dangerous, Wyatt objected. Sarah's eyes flashed. I spent 3 years undercover in Chicago gambling dens. I can handle a small-town banker. Wyatt recognized the determination in her voice, the same tone Cooper used when he'd made up his mind. He nodded reluctantly. Tomorrow, then, Sarah distracts Montgomery while Black Hawk and I infiltrate the mine. Gray Wolf's men provide backup if needed. As they finalized their plan, none of them noticed the figure slipping away from the edge of the camp. A young Cheyenne boy who worked in town, eager to earn coins from the white men who asked questions about the Indians in the hills. The silver mine dominated the northern edge of Redemption Valley, a gaping wound in the mountainside surrounded by processing sheds and guard posts. Wyatt and Black Hawk observed from a ridge above, noting the patrol patterns. 4 guards at the main entrance, Black Hawk whispered. 2 more by the processing shed. The dynamite storage is there. He pointed to a small wooden structure set apart from the others, with just 1 guard. From there, we can access the secondary shaft. Wyatt nodded. And Cooper? If he's alive, they'll keep him deep in the mine. There's a section they use for storage and punishment. The plan was simple but dangerous. Sarah would meet Montgomery at the bank at noon, keeping him occupied. Meanwhile, Wyatt and Blackhawk would infiltrate the mine, locate Cooper, and escape through the secondary shaft where Grey Wolf's men would be waiting with horses. As the sun reached its zenith, they moved into position. Sarah had ridden into town earlier, dressed in her finest clothes, playing the part of a widow ready to surrender. Wyatt and Blackhawk crept toward the dynamite shed, using the workers' lunch break as cover. The lone guard never saw Blackhawk coming. The deputy slipped behind him, clamping a hand over the man's mouth while applying pressure to his carotid artery. The guard slumped unconscious without raising an alarm. Inside the shed, they found the entrance to the secondary shaft. The air grew cool as they descended into darkness, guided by Blackhawk's memory in a single lantern. The tunnel connected to the main mine through a series of narrow passages, the sound of pickaxes and shovels growing louder as they approached. "This way," Blackhawk whispered, turning into a side tunnel. "Storage rooms ahead." They passed crates of supplies and equipment until reaching a heavy wooden door with a padlock. Wyatt examined it, then took out Cooper's old service revolver, the gun he'd found hidden at the sheriff's cabin. Using the butt, he smashed the lock, the sound masked by the ongoing mining activity. The door swung open to reveal a figure slumped against the wall. Thomas Cooper was barely recognizable, his face swollen from beatings, his sheriff's uniform torn and bloodied. But his eyes still held the same determination Wyatt remembered from Chancellorsville. "Took your time," Cooper croaked, a ghost of a smile crossing his battered face. "Traffic was hell," Wyatt replied, helping his old friend to his feet. "Can you walk?" Cooper nodded weakly. "Miller wants the map and the letter. Thinks I hid them." "We've got them," Blackhawk said, supporting Cooper's other side. "Sarah Hawkins found them." Cooper's face darkened. "Sarah. No, she's not." A coughing fit interrupted him. "Save your strength," Wyatt urged. "We're getting you out of here." They had nearly reached the secondary shaft when alarm bells began ringing throughout the mine. Shouts echoed down the tunnels. They'd been discovered. "Move," Wyatt ordered, half carrying Cooper toward the exit. "Blackhawk, lead the way." They reached the dynamite shed just as the first guards appeared at the tunnel entrance. Wyatt fired twice, forcing them back. Outside, chaos had erupted. Grey Wolf's warriors were engaged with Miller's men, providing the diversion they needed. Horses waited nearby, held by a young Cheyenne warrior. "Get Cooper to the camp," Wyatt told Blackhawk. "I'll find Sarah." Before Blackhawk could object, Wyatt mounted and spurred his horse toward town. Gunfire followed him, but soon faded as he raced down the valley. Something had gone wrong. The alarm had been raised too early. And Cooper's reaction to Sarah's name gnawed at him. Redemption Valley's main street was unnaturally quiet when Wyatt arrived. No miners loitered outside the saloons. No merchants hawked their wares. Windows were shuttered, doors locked. A town preparing for violence. The bank stood at the center of the street, its stone facade a testament to the wealth flowing from the silver mine. Wyatt approached cautiously, gun ready. The front door hung partially open, unusual for a bank, especially during troubled times. Inside, the bank was empty. Papers littered the floor. A chair lay overturned. Signs of a struggle. Wyatt moved toward the back office, hearing voices. He recognized one immediately. Marcus Reed. "The documents weren't at the ranch," Reed was saying. "Morgan must have them, but with her as bait, he'll come. You've mishandled this from the start." A new voice, cultured and Eastern. "The association doesn't tolerate failure, Mr. Reed." "I'll get Morgan and the documents," Reed insisted. "He has a weakness for damsels in distress." Wyatt peered around the doorframe. Reed stood with his back to the door. Across from him sat a distinguished gentleman in an expensive suit, clearly the association representative. Between them, tied to a chair, was Sarah. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead. but her eyes burned with defiance. The Eastern man sighed. See that you do. The governor arrives tonight, and everything must be finalized. The railroad cannot be delayed. What about the woman? Reed asked. Dispose of her once you have Morgan and the documents. No loose ends. Wyatt had heard enough. He stepped into the doorway. Colt leveled. How about a new plan? Reed spun, drawing his gun with impressive speed. Wyatt fired first, his bullet striking Reed's shoulder, spinning him backward. The association man lunged for a drawer, but Wyatt's second shot splintered the desk inches from his hand. Touch that drawer and the next one goes between your eyes, Wyatt warned. Reed clutched his bleeding shoulder, hatred burning in his eyes. Still can't finish the job, Morgan? Still can't pull the trigger when it matters? Wyatt kept his gun steady. Untie her, Reed. Now. As Reed reluctantly moved to obey, the front door of the bank crashed open. Heavy footsteps approached. Multiple men. That'll be Miller, the association man said calmly. You've lost, Mr. Morgan. Wyatt glanced at Sarah, a silent communication passing between them. She nodded almost imperceptibly. As Reed bent to untie her, Sarah drove her head forward, smashing into his wounded shoulder. Reed howled in pain as Wyatt grabbed Sarah's chair, dragging her toward a side door. Bullets splintered the door frame as they escaped into an alley. Wyatt quickly cut Sarah's bonds with his hunting knife. Cooper's alive, he told her as they ran, but he seemed mighty concerned when we mentioned your name. Sarah avoided his eyes. It's complicated. They emerged onto a back street just as a massive thunderclap shook the town. Storm clouds had gathered over the mountains, unusually dark and threatening for the season. The camp, Wyatt decided. We'll regroup with Black Hawk and Cooper, figure out our next move. As they mounted fresh horses from the livery stable, the first heavy raindrops began to fall. By the time they reached the foothills, they rode through a downpour, thunder masking the sound of their escape. They arrived at Grey Wolf's camp to find devastation. Teepees lay flattened, belongings scattered by the wind and rain. Bodies, both Cheyenne and white men, littered the ground. Miller's men found the camp, Black Hawk said, emerging from the tree line with a rifle. His face was a mask of controlled fury. My father is dead. So are many others. Wyatt dismounted, surveying the destruction. Cooper? Alive, but barely. He's in that cave. Black Hawk pointed to a narrow opening in the rocks. He's been asking for you. Says it's important. Inside the cave, Cooper lay on a makeshift bed of blankets, his breathing shallow. His eyes opened as Wyatt knelt beside him. The documents, Cooper whispered. We have them. Safe. Cooper shook his head weakly. Not safe. Not with her. His hand clutched Wyatt's wrist with surprising strength. Sarah Hawkins is Catherine Miller, Victor's sister. The revelation hit Wyatt like a physical blow. He turned to look at Sarah, who stood at the cave entrance, her face illuminated by a flash of lightning. Is it true? Wyatt demanded. Sarah's shoulders sagged. Yes, Victor is my brother, but James was truly my husband, and they killed him. Her voice hardened. The association ordered it when he refused to sell. Victor carried it out to prove his loyalty. You've been playing both sides, Wyatt said, the pieces falling into place. At first, yes. I came to spy for Victor, but then I fell in love with James. When they killed him, her voice broke. I wanted evidence to destroy them all, Victor included. Cooper coughed, blood speckling his lips. The meeting? Tonight, at the Grand Hotel, every major investor, the governor, all there. Wyatt stood, decision made. Then that's where we'll be. With these documents and Cooper's testimony, we can end this tonight. Cooper won't survive the journey to town, Black Hawk warned. I'll take a signed statement. With the documents, it should be enough for the federal marshal. Wyatt turned to Sarah. But I'll need the truth from you. All of it. Sarah met his gaze unflinchingly. Victor doesn't know I've turned against him. I can get us into the meeting, but once we're inside, we'll be surrounded by the most powerful men in the territory, Wyatt finished, all with a vested interest in seeing us dead. Blackhawk checked his rifle. I'll position myself across from the hotel. Cover your escape. As they prepared to leave, Cooper beckoned Wyatt closer. Trust her, Wyatt, he whispered. She could have let them kill me. Instead, she warned me about the ambush. Too late to save myself, but she tried. The rain continued to pour as they wrote out Cooper's statement and prepared for their final confrontation. By the time they mounted their horses for the ride back to town, night had fallen, the storm transforming the valley into a treacherous landscape of mud and flash floods. The Grand Hotel blazed with light, a beacon in the storm-lashed darkness of Redemption Valley. Inside, men in expensive suits mingled in the ballroom, drinking champagne and discussing the future development of the territory. Maps covered the walls showing proposed railroad routes, town sites, and industrial developments. Sarah entered first, wearing a fine dress Blackhawk had salvaged from the camp, clothing left by his late wife. She nodded to the guards who recognized her as Miller's sister and allowed her to pass. Wyatt followed minutes later, dressed in clothes taken from one of Miller's dead men, the documents hidden inside his coat. The territorial governor stood near the center of the room, deep in conversation with the association representative from the bank. Victor Miller hovered nearby, his usual confidence slightly diminished in such distinguished company. None noticed Wyatt's entrance or his careful positioning near the main doors. Sarah approached her brother, placing a hand on his arm. The gesture drew the attention of the association man, who frowned upon seeing her. "Miss Miller," he said coldly, "I was informed you were indisposed." "Rumors of my capture were exaggerated, Mr. Harrington," Sarah replied smoothly, "though not for lack of trying by your man Reed." Victor's face darkened. "What are you talking about, Catherine? Reed works for us." "Reed works for himself," Sarah countered. "And Mr. Harrington here authorized him to kill me once I'd served my purpose." She turned to the governor. "Just as he authorized the murder of 7 ranchers who refused to sell their land, including my husband." Murmurs rippled through the gathering. The governor looked uncomfortable. "Miss Miller, these are serious accusations, with serious evidence to support them," Wyatt said, stepping forward and removing the documents from his coat. "Financial records, orders for elimination of obstacles, and a complete list of bribes paid to territorial officials, including yourself, Governor." Recognition dawned in Victor's eyes. "Morgan!" His hand moved toward his gun. "I wouldn't," Wyatt warned. "Blackhawk has a rifle trained on this room from across the street. First man to draw dies." Harrington's composure never wavered. "You've gone to a great deal of trouble, Mr. Morgan, but surely you understand your position. Even if these documents are genuine, who would believe a washed-up Confederate scout and a grieving widow over the most powerful men in the territory?" "The federal marshal might," Wyatt replied, "especially with Sheriff Cooper's sworn testimony." Victor's face paled. "Cooper's alive?" A commotion at the entrance interrupted them. Marcus Reed staggered into the ballroom, blood soaking his shirt from his reopened shoulder wound. His eyes locked on Wyatt. "Morgan," he growled, "always running, always hiding behind others." His hand hovered near his gun. "Not this time." Wyatt's voice remained calm. "It's over, Reed. The documents are going to the federal authorities." Reed laughed, a harsh sound that ended in a cough. "No one's leaving this room alive except the association men. Miller's boys have the hotel surrounded. Your Indian friend is probably already dead." As if to punctuate his statement, a rifle shot cracked from outside, followed by the sound of breaking glass. A bullet struck the wall inches from Wyatt's head. Chaos erupted in the ballroom. Guests dove for cover as more shots came through the windows. Wyatt grabbed Sarah, pulling her behind an overturned table as Reed drew his gun. The first shot went wide, splintering the table edge. Wyatt returned fire, his bullet catching Reed in the chest. The scarred man staggered backward, firing twice more before collapsing. Across the room, Victor Miller was escorting Harrington and the governor toward a rear exit. Wyatt spotted them through the confusion. "Stay here," he ordered Sarah, pressing Cooper's revolver into her hand. "Cover the documents." Wyatt moved through the panicked crowd, staying low. A bullet grazed his side, but he pushed forward, reaching the hallway just as the three men disappeared through a door marked "Private." The door led to a staircase ascending to the hotel roof. Wyatt followed, gun ready. Rain lashed the rooftop as he emerged, nearly blinding him. Through the downpour, he could make out three figures moving toward a waiting carriage in the alley below. "Stop right there," Wyatt called, his voice barely audible over the storm. The men turned. Victor stepped forward, positioning himself between Wyatt and the others. "You've caused enough trouble, Morgan." "Your men killed Cooper," Wyatt said. "Just got word. That makes this personal." Victor drew his gun with practiced precision. "You won't leave this roof alive." Lightning flashed, illuminating the scene in stark white. Both men fired simultaneously. Wyatt felt the burn as a bullet creased his ribs, but his own shot struck truer, catching Victor in the chest. The big man stumbled backward, firing again wildly before toppling over the edge of the roof. Harrington had drawn a small derringer, but Wyatt was faster. A single shot sent the association man sprawling. The governor raised his hands in surrender, rain plastering his expensive suit to his trembling frame. "The association will bury you," the governor warned. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Wyatt replied, keeping his gun trained on the man. "Cowards who hide behind money and politics, while better men die for their greed." Gunfire continued below, but a new sound cut through the chaos. A cavalry bugle. Federal troops had arrived, summoned by Cooper's final act before his death. A telegram sent to the Fort Laramie garrison explaining the situation. Wyatt marched the governor back downstairs at gunpoint. The ballroom had mostly emptied, but Sarah remained, holding the documents safely. Outside, soldiers were disarming Miller's men. "Cooper?" Sarah asked, seeing the grim look in Wyatt's eyes. "Dead," but he made it count. 3 months later, Wyatt Morgan stood on the porch of the Hawkins Ranch house, now his house. The valley spread before him, green and peaceful. In the distance, construction crews worked on the new railroad line, built with fair compensation to all landowners, under the watchful eye of federal authorities. The territorial governor had resigned in disgrace. The Western Development Association had withdrawn from Wyoming, its reputation tarnished by the scandal. And Victor Miller was buried in the town cemetery alongside Marcus Reed and the other men who died for their ambition. Sarah approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She had chosen to return east to testify against the remaining association members. She would leave in the morning. "I never thanked you properly," she said, handing him a cup, "for believing me in the end." Wyatt nodded, sipping the strong coffee. "Cooper believed in you. That was good enough." They stood in companionable silence, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Black Hawk had taken his father's place as leader of the remaining Cheyenne, negotiating a formal treaty with the new territorial administration. He visited occasionally, bringing news and sharing meals. "What will you do now?" Sarah asked. "Stay here?" Wyatt considered the question. At 48, he'd seen enough violence for several lifetimes. The ranch offered peace, a chance to build something rather than destroy. "For a while," he answered. "This land has good bones." As darkness fell, Wyatt Morgan, Confederate scout, bounty hunter, and now rancher, watched the first stars appear above the last true frontier. Not all battles were fought with guns, he reflected. Some were won simply by standing your ground against those who would take what wasn't theirs. In the distance, a wolf howled, a sound both ancient and free. Wyatt smiled, raising his coffee cup in a silent toast to Cooper, to Grey Wolf, to all those who died protecting this valley. The frontier might be closing, but some things were worth preserving until the end.